So psyched that you're on. This is great. Oh, now I heard you got me a gift? Oh, so sweet. Should I read it? No. Yes, okay.
Stevie Nicks has been the high priestess of rock royalty for decades. With a haunting voice wrapped in velvet, lace, and mythology, she danced through the 1970s like a storm in heels, leaving behind chart-topping records, wrecked love affairs, and a mystery that most musicians can only imitate. But what about Stevie herself? Her lyrics alluded to heartache, longing, and betrayal. She rarely mentioned names, until now. In a recently unearthed, unedited interview shot in 2024, the world got something it never expected. Stevie Nicks without her metaphor. No riddles, no cryptic poetry, just naked honesty about the rock stars who betrayed her, the friends who disappeared when she needed them the most, and the bandmates who attempted to erase her magic from history. "I kept it quiet for years," she admits in the dimly lit recording, "because I did not want to be the woman who always talked about her scars. But I believe I have earned the right to share my tale." And with that, the magic was broken. What ensued was not a rant, it was a reckoning. Stevie, with her trademark rasp and crystal-clear recollection, described situations that fans never witnessed, backstage silences that stung deeper than words, recording sessions where her compositions were ignored, and friendships that disintegrated beneath the weight of ego and fame. The internet erupted within hours of the clip surfacing. Hashtags like #StevieDeservedBetter and #FleetwoodFacts were popular globally. Fans were divided, with some astonished and others unsurprised, because despite her flowing robes and dreamy songs, Stevie was never anyone's fool. This was not about vengeance. It was about liberation. "They thought I would forget," she explains at the end of the video. But witches never forget. We remember everything, and so shall we. Lindsey Buckingham is a name that will always be associated with Stevie Nicks in terms of love, music, and tragedy. Their narrative is as mythological as the tunes they created. Two California dreamers became celebrities, their romance transforming into the heartache that drove Fleetwood Mac's most famous songs. But what fans did not realize, and Stevie never admitted publicly until today, was that Lindsey did not simply break her heart. "He broke something in me that took decades to repair," Stevie continues, eyes fixed and voice calm. "And when I finally stood up for myself, he punished me for it." Lindsey, according to her, was more than simply an ex-boyfriend. He became the band's creative gatekeeper, wielding actual and figurative influence over her voice as they rose to global prominence. She remembers sessions in which he would cut her off mid-song, roll his eyes at her lyrics, and complain that her contributions were too commercial or not musical enough. "He had a way of making me feel like a guest in a house I helped build," she says. "I would write a song, bring it in, and watch him criticize it, not to improve it, but to make himself feel superior." Stevie believes Lindsey fought to keep her songs off specific Fleetwood Mac albums, or buried them deep in the track list. She claims she would arrive early at the studio merely to avoid his chilly silence, or worse, his passive-aggressive criticisms spoken behind closed doors. It was not simply about artistic stress, it was emotional control, she explains. "I knew what he was doing, but I was not sure how to stop it." And it was not limited to the studio. She recalls tour times when he purposefully upstaged her on stage, extending his solos, insulting her dancing, and even ignoring her completely during duets they would once written in love. They saw chemistry. I felt tense. Every show was a minefield. But what stung her the most came years later, when Fleetwood Mac reformed in the 2010 and Stevie had established her own place in history. She was no longer Lindsey's ex. She was Stevie Nicks, a rock and roll Hall of Famer, icon, and inspiration to generations of women. And yet, she claims, he could not let go of the need to control. "He could not stand that I was thriving without him," she says, "so he tried to punish me through his silence." It all came to a head during a backstage brawl in 2018, which resulted in Buckingham's dismissal from Fleetwood Mac. While the official line was schedule issues and creative disputes, Stevie admits that Lindsey's inability to respect her space or voice was the true breaking point. "He mocked me at a band meeting. I had had enough. I replied, 'If he remains, I go.' And for once they chose me." She does not enjoy his removal. In fact, she describes it as tragic but necessary. However, she does not mince words. "He was the biggest heartbreak of my youth. Then he became the gradual betrayal of my womanhood." Stevie still does not talk with hatred. Her voice contains melancholy, softness even. "I loved him once. I believe a part of me always will. But you cannot let someone keep reducing you simply because they once loved you a lot." Stevie Nicks does not intend to rewrite history by mentioning Lindsey Buckingham as one of the men who wronged her. She absolutely refuses to let him compose it alone. To the world, they were two queens in sync, the mystical poet and the soulful songbird. Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie were an unusual combination in a rock period dominated by swaggering males and backstage testosterone. Two women unaffected by egos carved out their own place in a chaotic band. Behind the harmonies and grins, there was a crack, one that was never fully cured. "Christine was my anchor in Fleetwood Mac," Stevie confesses in her now viral interview. "She was my balance. This is my safe place." And then she left. Christine McVie unexpectedly announced her retirement from Fleetwood Mac in 1998. No serious scandals, no farewell tour, just a quiet decision to leave the band, the road, and in many ways, Stevie herself. "She said she was done," Stevie recalls, eyes lowered. "She stated she needed peace. I respected that, but it felt like someone had pulled the floor out from beneath me." Stevie was coping with her own demons at the time, including chronic exhaustion, health issues, and the crushing emotional weight of keeping Fleetwood Mac together. Christine's departure made her the lone woman in a room filled with history, grudges, and unspoken hostility. "I do not think anyone knows what that felt like," she says. "It was like being dropped back into the war zone, without your fellow soldier." According to Stevie, the dynamic in the band changed considerably once Christine left. Without her calm presence and capacity to arbitrate, previous wounds between Lindsey and Mick emerged quickly. What had previously been manageable became terrible. "She was the buffer," Stevie explains. "She would roll her eyes when the boys became too boisterous. She would speak up when I was too exhausted to. When she went out, the quiet was deafening." Stevie never openly showed her wrath towards Christine at the time, and she still does not feel rage. It is something heavier, abandonment. "I do not blame her for choosing peace," Stevie explains. "I blame her for not realizing I still needed her." Christine kept quiet in the years that followed. She returned to England, kept a low profile, and left Fleetwood Mac and Stevie to deal with the publicity, pressure, and legacy. The two would occasionally exchange emails or birthday pleasantries, but Stevie claimed that something was broken. "She was my best friend, and then she wasn't." Fans cheered Christine's homecoming in 2014, 16 years after she had left. The media dubbed it the Fleetwood Mac Healing Tour, but for Stevie, it was not so simple. "I welcomed her back with open arms," Stevie explains. However, something had changed. She was different, and so was I. Stevie describes their relationship as cordial, loving, but cautious. They used to joke about boyfriends and boots, but now they chat about set lists and trip plans. Despite the presence of magic, trust was lacking. "We hugged on stage, we sang Rhiannon and You Make Loving Fun, but we never discussed what happened." Stevie recalls one night on the 2015 tour when they sat alone after a show with a bottle of wine. Stevie attempted to bring it up, the abruptness of Christine's departure, the loneliness it caused. But Christine brushed it off. She said, "We are here now, love. That is what matters." However, it did matter. To me, it always has. Then came the last chapter. Christine McVie died unexpectedly in November 2022 after a brief illness. Stevie's social media tribute was sincere, eloquent, and full of emotion. But privately, she says that the loss has revived all of the scars she thought had been healed by time. "There was something I wanted to communicate, things I was hoping we would talk about, and now the door is closed. When asked why Christine is one of the betrayals in her life, Stevie pauses for a long time. Then she gently explains, "It is not like she wounded me on purpose. It is that she left while I still needed her and never really returned. She is not angry, she is heartbroken. Because despite all of the headlines about Fleetwood Mac's problems with men, the true love story and loss could have been between the two ladies who stood side by side, singing over the cacophony. She was my sister, and when she went, it was like losing a family member." In the end, Stevie Nicks does not express resentment towards Christine. She speaks as if she has lost something valuable, and the echo of her absence can be felt every time she takes the stage alone. To the general public, it was a brief romance between two icons in the late 1970s, when Stevie Nicks and Don Henley crossed paths both romantically and musically. To Stevie, it was significantly more confusing. "He was not just a fling," she states clearly. "I let him inside, and he used my name like it was a song lyric, something catchy and sellable." Their relationship was never long-term, but it was intense enough to spark rumors of a pregnancy, song collaboration, and even a shared residence. In later interviews, Henley frequently brought up their time together, making Stevie uneasy. "I would open a magazine, and there he was, talking about me like a chapter in his autobiography," she recalls. "But I never gave him permission to share my story." Stevie believes Henley manufactured elements about their relationship, particularly a pregnancy and a lost child, in order to frame her in a narrative she never committed to. She does not refute the facts, but she dislikes how he presented them. "Some things should remain sacred," she explains. "If you truly cared about me, you would protect the truth rather than parade it." In a 1991 interview, Henley reportedly said that the Eagles' song "Wasted Time" was inspired in part by his time with Stevie, a revelation that fans ate up. But Stevie claims the attention was never flattering. It seemed exploitative. "I am not a footnote in anyone's discography," she states bluntly. "I was not a muse. I was a woman who loved you and was hurt." She also claims that Henley never fully saw her as an equal in music. Despite her solo triumph and artistic achievements, she claims he treated her as a guest in the Boys Club of Rock, a talented woman who was never allowed to sit at the table. "He would call me whenever he wanted backup vocals, but he never inquired what I was working on." Even after they stopped seeing each other, Henley's statements continued to appear on radio shows, memoirs, and in interviews, always romantic, always nostalgic, but never accurate. He delivered the narrative in a way that made him think deeply, sensitive. And me, I was the tragic and mysterious woman in the background. She makes it clear that this is not about bitterness. It is all about boundaries. Women in music rarely get to draw this kind of attention when their names become public property. "You cannot reduce me to a memory when I am still alive," she argues. And while she says she wishes him well, she closes with this calm final line: "Do not tell my story unless you are brave enough to ask how it ends." Stevie Nicks' use of the name Tom Petty in her litany of betrayals evokes both love and grief. "Tommy was my hero, my teacher, my musically inclined brother, but there were occasions, which I never mentioned, when I felt little in his shadow." Their friendship was legendary, two opposing voices that blended wonderfully. She admired Petty's gritty, blue-collar rock attitude. He admired her mystique and melody. Their duet on "Stop Draggin' My Heart Around" was one of the most renowned duets of the 1980s. Yet even that song, Stevie claims, had strings attached. "That song? It was not supposed to be mine. That was his. He gave it to me reluctantly," she reveals. "I believe he never fully forgave me for making it a hit." According to Stevie, when she recorded the song for her solo album Belladonna, she felt like she was stepping into his turf and was made to feel like a guest in her own accomplishment. "They told me to be appreciative, not to be too proud, and the higher it rose, the further away he became." She writes that, as much as she adored Tom, there were numerous times in which he, or members of his staff, minimized her contributions to collaborations or ignored her ideas in the studio. "I would bring lyrics, guitar riffs, and sometimes complete concepts to him. Sometimes they were heard, sometimes they weren't, but I never received credit, not on paper or in the news. And it was not all about the music. Stevie claims she sometimes felt like a prop in his mythology, a Stevie-shaped cameo used to smooth his edges, making him appear more sophisticated and romantic. He called me his little sister, but he never inquired how I was doing. Not really, not when it mattered. Despite this, Stevie stayed loyal. She performed beside him. She complimented him endlessly in interviews. She kept his memory alive following his untimely passing in 2017. However, she secretly regretted that they had never had the necessary chat. I never told him how badly I hurt, and suddenly he was gone. When she talks about Tom now, it is not with bitterness. It is with sadness for the version of their friendship that never truly existed. He was my hero, she says softly. But sometimes our heroes forget that we too are people. Stevie said she has attempted over the years to assert herself, to be viewed not just as Tom Petty's mystical friend, but as an artist of equal weight. However, she often felt silenced in subtle ways. He did not shout at me. He simply did not listen. That can be louder than yelling. However, when asked if she forgives him, she smiles. Of course, I loved him. I still do. However, part of love is telling the truth. I wish he saw me as more than a supporting character in his story. For Stevie Nicks, Tom Petty represented the heartbreak that never looked like it. A friend, a mentor, and in the silent corners of history, one more guy forgot she was not present to sing in the background. She was always destined to take center stage. When people think of Fleetwood Mac, they envision two men, Lindsey Buckingham, the troubled genius, and Mick Fleetwood, the towering drummer who kept the band going. But, as Stevie Nicks now maintains, few realize that Mick was more than simply the band's backbone. He was also her largest hurdle at times. He safeguarded the band, but not me, Stevie declares without hesitation. When things got tough, I became a problem to manage, not a person to help. In the early days of Fleetwood Mac's commercial success, Stevie says she looked to Mick as a stabilizing influence, the elder, wiser figure who could mediate between her and Lindsey, between her creative voice and the machine they would all created. However, she argues that trust has increasingly deteriorated. When I spoke up, it was difficult. When I pushed for more control over the business, I was emotional. I was always the liability, never the leader. She remembers how decisions concerning the band's direction were made in closed rooms, often without her knowledge, even when those decisions had a direct impact on her voice, songs, and stage appearance. Mick, she claims, preferred diplomacy over fairness, frequently siding with what was easiest rather than what was right. He did not silence me with words. He did it by omission. Meetings I was not invited to, with phone calls I was not on. She recalls a particularly terrible moment from the 1987 Tango in the Night era. Stevie was straining to balance solo success and Fleetwood Mac duties, and instead of assistance, she claims Mick offered her an ultimatum. He responded, "If you cannot keep up, we will continue without you." That was it. No conversation, no compassion. But the biggest hurt, she claims, occurred during the band's final years together, when Mick began contemplating future tours and legacy decisions, once again without her. I learned about plans from management, from press leaks. I was a key member of that band, yet I was treated as a guest star. Despite this, Stevie does not underestimate Mick's importance in her life. She refers to him as a beautiful disaster, a man caught between commerce and art, friendship and control. But she is clear, the betrayal was real. He told me that we were family, but when it came time to defend me, he followed in the footsteps of the others. To this day, she describes their connection as cordial, not close. They can share a stage, a photo, or a memory, but the trust is gone. "Mick, let the machine get louder than the music," she urges quietly. And somewhere in that noise, I disappeared. When Stevie's statements hit the airwaves, the internet exploded. Within hours, hashtags such as #StevieTellsAll, #JusticeForNicks, and #FleetwoodFallout spread over social media. Fans who had admired the band's mystique for decades were now confronted with the unvarnished truth about the legends they had adored. "I knew there was drama," one tweet said, "but I did not realize it was this cruel." Younger fans, many of whom had only recently discovered Fleetwood Mac via streaming and TikTok, were astonished to learn of the emotional cost of the songs they danced to. Older fans, who had grown up with Rumors and Belladonna, were devastated but not shocked. "She carried that band for decades," remarked one fan, "and they allowed her to do it alone. The reactions were passionate, yet divided. While thousands hailed Stevie's bravery in finally speaking up, some questioned the timing. Why now? They inquired. Why stir up spirits that should be buried? But for many, the solution was obvious. The ghosts were never buried. They were simply silenced. "She is not dragging anyone," read one viral response. "She is reclaiming her story." Celebrities and fellow musicians supported her. Brandi Carlile, Haim, and Florence Welch all paid tribute to Stevie, describing her as a survivor, a blueprint, and a goddess who never got her due. Even some men in the industry, including longtime colleague Dave Grohl, acknowledged the industry's long history of undervaluing female performers. Meanwhile, devoted Fleetwood Mac fans struggled to reconcile legacy and reality. Could they still love Go Your Own Way, knowing what Stevie went through behind the scenes? Could they still revisit earlier interviews, knowing how much was left out? "It hurts," one longtime fan wrote, "but perhaps it is meant to, because what Stevie Nicks disclosed was not solely about her. It was about every woman in rock who was erased, disregarded, or edited out, until eventually one of them had the bravery to say, 'I was there, and this is what they did.'" For over 5 decades, Stevie Nicks has let her music speak for her. She danced in the darkness, turned heartache into poetry, and soared above the pandemonium with scarves and stillness. But now, as she nears the end of a famous career, she is choosing something different. She is choosing the truth. "I am not naming names to hurt anyone," she says in the last few minutes of the interview. "I am naming them so I can finally put them down. It is not about vengeance. It is all about release." Because for years, Stevie held stories that were never published, events that were never captured in documentaries, and feelings that were never expressed in music. She was the fabled woman on stage, ethereal and untouchable. But beneath the lace was a girl who had been talked over, walked out on, and silently erased. "I survived the men," she explains, "the ones I loved, the ones who abandoned me, and the ones who never saw me." By sharing her truth today, even if it is difficult and shatters illusions, she is granting permission to any woman in music who has ever felt like a supporting character in her own story. She is reclaiming her heritage, not as someone's muse, mystery, or remembrance, but as the creator of her own tale. In the end, Stevie is not attempting to change history. She is merely making sure her chapter is written in her own terms. "I forgave everyone," she replies softly, "but I have not forgotten. And perhaps remembering is how I win." Because if rock and roll ever had a memory keeper, a lady who recalled what others wished time would forget, it was Stevie Nicks. And now that she has spoken, the music will never sound the same.